he's gonna be kind of heads up for her before she gets here. Thank you guys. I do want to say thanks for the message. That it has been a great year, and thank you to Richard for providing snacks for our little year-end soiree. If he had not, maybe I would have brought more champagne. No. But it has been a really impactful big year for the steering committee, and your participation has been so welcome and so appreciated. And I think we have big things coming up next year. So I know sometimes December is a month that we call it off, but since we've been rolling and we've got some big things coming up, I thought we just have it. So thank you for being here. I know everyone's starting to get ready for the holidays, but I just.
Grandkids' Christmas program to be here.
Oh, so at the end, we'll all have to sing for you. Well, thank you, Bruce. Yeah, I should have brought, or scotch. Okay, so did everyone have a chance to look at this AI generated summary?
Yeah.
I was shocked. It is very, very good. And it kind of holds us to some stuff. It's like, oh yeah, we're supposed to go everyone was supposed to send pictures and things. So this, I think I'm starting a Zoom right now. Hopefully it will just have the summary again. And this is a good way to have some minutes to send out. But I mean, we'll keep doing this if that works for everybody, because AI it's a little scary, to be honest, a little bit scary. Did anybody have any comments to the minutes or meeting notes or anything carry over from last time?
Nice.
This is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, we are going to go around right now and have updates from, we're going to skip Councilwoman Sawyer because she's going to be here when she can get here, but we're going to jump over that, and Richard Barrett will tell us a little bit about the very busy Cherry Creek North. Anybody who tried to drive here, I walked, but it's kind of, it's busy, which is good. And we have a new manager of the mall we'll introduce in a moment, and a new head of the chamber that Richard will introduce. So I'm going to turn it over to Richard.
All right. Well, thank you, Lou. Well, gosh, I'm sorry for being here. I'd just like to say what a great year it's been in Cherry Creek. And I think we've made some really positive progress this year. And, this group has a big impact on what happens in this neighborhood. So we can't thank you enough from the bid perspective for the partnership that we feel with the steering committee, with the RNO, and with just the community members. I'll tell you about the opportunity to meet the upcoming class going to the Denver Police Academy this morning. So these are the new recruits that'll be going into the academy. It's really nice to get to spend time with them and give them the Cherry Creek perspective on what to expect and how to community police and how important they are to the success of our neighborhood, our businesses. And it was just really refreshing to be able to see these young folks, some of them not as young, that are going into this great line of work and really be able to talk about how they can impact our community. So hopefully good things to come on that front. For Cherry Creek North, right now we're kind of wrapping up our holiday season. I'd say we have the holiday market going. We're really busy with that. Traffic is up significantly. Sales are up significantly in the holiday market. We don't get store reporting sales. We do get holiday market just from the manager of the market. And we're just seeing really great traffic in the neighborhood. And we really feel that's just due to a lot of things with the lighting program now being advanced really impactful the last 5 years with that investment. We feel that people are starting to make Cherry Creek a holiday tradition, a lot of folks, and that market is now their fourth year. So we're really seeing some positive just traffic and numbers from that. On the other side, a lot of construction's coming up, right? I think we all know that. We've all heard about what's going on, but 209 Milwaukee is now fenced off and they're getting ready to go to demo. They have some abatement to finish up. We'll start demo on that project the first of the year. That will close the sidewalk around that building. That's such a big project, that sidewalk will be closed. On the opposite side of the street where the office building is going, we'll have a pedestrian covered walkway to make sure you can still get north-south on Milwaukee. So we will have a pedestrian walkway on that side of the street. Really, we try to look at all those decisions and partner with the city on making sure we're keeping right-of-way open whenever we can. We think the Waldorf Astoria is going to break ground soon. You know, they're getting further through design review. So they just were in our last design meeting and made some really great changes to that building that we like to see. So that project is picking up speed. The Clayton Lane project is picking up speed. I think we'll start seeing some debrading and stuff starting around February on that building. So just a lot of upcoming projects in the neighborhood. And, you know, our focus is going to be a lot on construction management. I mean, flip from construction management over to public safety. That is probably the one thing that I think impacts all of us the most. And I am pleased to announce today, because everybody knows about the crime that goes on in the neighborhood, that today an arrest was made at about 2:30 on who was the alleged getaway driver on those watch robberies.
Wow.
The clue that led to that arrest was that flock camera system we just put in. So it paid off right away.
Oh, wow.
Right away. That's the only way that we were able to find the vehicles. And yeah, we put some cameras, 11 cameras in that are networked to the police department. So my security team doesn't have access to them, however the police do. And it scans all the license plates and gives the detectives the ability to go back and see what vehicles in the public right away might fit the description of that crime. And, you know, just pleased that that system is immediately paid off for us. I can tell you, we've had that car in custody for quite some time, and the detectives did a great job building this case. And I can't get into all the details, but I think more to come after this arrest, and they'll be able to continue prosecuting that and finding who we think is the bad guy with the gun, not the getaway driver, and make progress on that. We did have a attempted purse snatch in the district this last week, and it was actually one of our bid employees. He was walking up on 3rd and Fillmore. So that did happen, but we have that vehicle in custody already, and they're processing it today. Another clue that came out of our flock system. So we're seeing immediate payoff on some of the security investments.
What word would get out to the,
Yeah, that's our goal. And, you know, right now I can just say, since we've taken that vehicle into custody on the watch robberies, you know, we definitely saw a downtick, because that car was in the district and I could track it multiple times. But, you know, the police did amazing work on this. And I'd say, if you guys have a chance to talk to District 3, the command staff, the detectives down there, express that appreciation to them, because they're working very hard to solve crimes for us. We're very fortunate that, Mike Cordova, the detective on that case, happens to be one of our off-duty officers. He works here 2 days a week. And so he's really invested in this community. And, you know, he shows up as a reporting officer, but he's working for us and takes and takes the cases. So just a lot of really good things there. Looking forward to next year, we are in strategic security planning, deciding what we're going to do on our public safety side. And then we are also looking at what landscape enhancements we're going to make next year, kind of grading our planter beds. We're going to continue to go full throttle with landscaping. I will tell you, we planted 40,000 bulbs this fall. 40,000. So we're really expecting, you know, it's amazing. When you think 40,000 would go, it doesn't go as far as you think. It's really just that continuing evolution of how we're trying to invest in the landscape and just keep the neighborhood.
this needed now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to do something with the medians, and, you know, we're in some conversations in the shopping center and us in East West on really what we do those meetings, just to get them up to something that we're not embarrassed about. So we are talking about that from the business community, seeing how we can help and, you know, make sure that those things are being addressed. So that is kind of, let's say, security in a nutshell.
There are also a couple other 2 new restaurants in the plan.
Oh, gosh.
Saltwater
Saltwater
Social
Social.
and La Colonial.
Colonial. Yep.
Although I did talk to a friend who is, of course, in my age bracket, and she said she went to meet friends there, and it was so packed. They had a cocktail and they said, we can't hear each other. So they left.
They Colonial or in Saltwater?
La Colonial.
Colonial, yeah.
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 So,
That's a big space to have a lot of people.
yeah, but I think it has a lot of music, and
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of energy right now. But, you know, she's like, us old folks, we need a place where if we go to dinner with friends and we're gonna drop a lot of money, we can at least have a conversation. So,
Musil on the rocks.
oh, how sad. Yeah.
When we do lunch meetings, we're very strategic about where we meet with people, because I can't hear and Nick can't hear anymore. So we have to make sure we're in a quiet restaurant.
Right? Well, I think they'll get the message. I think that was, you know, several restaurants have done that, and people have said, you know, really, it's important for us people who can actually afford everything on this menu to be able to. So, but if you know, give them a try.
Yeah.
Let's keep the energy going in the neighborhood. You know, people say, do you want to meet at some place, new place in Lowdown? I'm like, no, I want to be able to walk. So, But anyway, and I think I actually heard that several of the Waldorf units are already under contract.
Oh, yeah, that is very true.
Nice.
The architects are already working with the owners on design aspects for those units.
So
Moving on.
amazing demand for
Okay.
condos. Yeah. I know, right? So that's, I think that's all
So,
really
yeah,
good
a
news.
lot of good stuff, a lot of
5 houses.
busy things. Of course, that's going to bring traffic and we're working hard on mobility. I can tell you, we've spent a lot of time with our consultant, Walker Consulting, on parking and mobility this year. And those plans take a while to figure out and they take a lot of money to fund. So we're definitely working diligently. I've highlighted some things that we really are going to be looking at, trying to make sure we can get folks to garages, not have folks just circling the right of way, looking at options for wayfinding and really trying to path out how we can finally put a stake in the ground and do something about parking and mobility. How can we get our employees into the district on a circulator shuttle or different things like that? So a lot of ideas out there, but we have to figure out funding on them and we have to path those out. But, you know, we're definitely diligently on trying to solve those issues. I'd say that's the oldest issue that we hear about is
Mhm.
parking, and it's really hard to make changes there, but we're definitely,
Priority that you place on safety first is important.
yeah,
You know, the money will come once you put safety in place. So then, yeah.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
make priorities.
Yeah, I always say, you know, and I appreciate that, you know, my boss came from the private sector and he ran shopping centers. We all know Nick. And, you know, the perspective on here is, you know, we can set the stage for success. If we do that, developers will develop, good things will happen. But if we can be clean and we can be safe and we can be well lit, you know, we be well landscaped. That's what makes the difference and drives all of the business to us. So,
I have a compliment for you. I have a relative from Sarasota, Florida, that was here 10 years ago. And was just here this week. I got a text message. He didn't have time to meet. He was going to the airport, but he said Cherry Creek is just amazing, he said.
I tell you, we love to hear it. We worked very hard this year. And I tell you, when we did a big plug-in for the lights and there was a mom who had her little baby and the baby lit up and the smile was like just a million miles wide with this baby's first Christmas when we plugged him in. That made all the work worth it right there. But I think with that, I just want to introduce Kyle Chisholm next to me. So everybody knows Christine Desapons has left the chamber and this is the new executive director. So
The new Christine.
let him take it over.
Before you move on, one quick question about the flock cameras that you brought in. Did you have trouble getting them? Did it take a lot longer than initially thought, or they came in?
No, they came in pretty good. I mean, installation took a bit longer. We had to go back and forth on where they would go. We had to make sure they were on our infrastructure, not Excel's.
Yeah.
I can tell you the city installed some on some Excel infrastructure and they said, okay, then all of a sudden the poles went away and the cameras disappeared and they had to figure out some things. So,
Right.
Okay,
we put everything on our infrastructure, so it was pretty easy for us.
all
Yeah,
right.
because our neighborhood just agreed to add, I think, four flock cameras
Yeah.
on our corners. So,
Yeah,
But it's taken
Yeah,
a while
it-
to figure out where and to get the cameras.
And then who is going to monitor it? I mean, these guys have a whole staff.
we don't monitor it.
No, the
No.
police will.
We don't monitor it. I
Oh,
don't, the
okay.
way the system is set up, I don't feel comfortable having my team to have access to it because this system runs through, you know, if there's warrants in the vehicle, if that license plate's reported stolen, a lot of stuff that the police respond to. We're fortunate that we have off-duty policing here 7 days a week, so our off-duty cops can get the alerts. And I can say on top of our off-duty cops, we have had a lot of police coverage in here that you haven't noticed. We have had full teams from District 3 down here, their anti-crime teams in plain clothes working this district.
Good to
Yeah,
know.
it's definitely from the detective's perspective, it is very important to, you know, solving things, which then stops those repeat offenders.
Great. Well, let's go back to Kyle. since-
Hi.
So and if we won't call you Christine too much longer. We'll
Yeah.
get
Just
you.
for a while, you know, I totally understand. These are very big shoes to fill. Christine is amazing and she's been a very good friend through this transition. So my background, I'm born and raised like literally same house, 4 generations, not all at the same time. Just over by the University of Denver. Most of my professional career has had some sort of involvement here in the neighborhood. Most recently, I came from Turner Construction, which I think you and I have crossed paths over the years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's positive.
And I was on the Jacquard build several years ago. That was the last project that Turner did here. But for 10 years, I was at Turner doing all of their external affairs, government affairs, you know, anything external to the organization or to the operations. But I found myself traveling the country. I had responsibility for 14 business units, and I just at a point in my career where I really want to focus on home, when there were houses in Cherry Creek North, my great grandparents, they lived on the mid block of Detroit between Second and Third, and I learned how to ride my bike over here. It's totally easy and nerdy, but so I feel like this is, in a way, it's a bit of a homecoming, and I get to really work and play, close to home. So yeah,
Full circle.
very much so, very much so. And our goals for the chamber this year kind of elevate the presence and I'll say professionalize the organization and craft stronger ties to our partners in there, including the bid and the alliance and the steering committee and the RNOs in the area. So yeah,
Well, welcome.
thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And did you have anything else?
No.
So good. It's a great time then to move on to introduce the new manager of the mall, Mike Wilson. And Mike, I just got the agenda to me, said he had some commitments. So, but he was going to stop by. We're really hoping you did. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and your plans.
Well, first of all, thank you for welcoming me to this. I appreciate you guys inviting me out and almost in direct contrast, I'm a new transplant to the neighborhood, but already in love with it. So definitely honored and happy to be here. I've spent some time in the Midwest in Chicago, spent some time up and down the state of California, and always had wanted to get to this area and have the opportunity to go get this opportunity. So 30 years in real estate, specifically retail, and a lot of mixed use experience. So happy and honored to be here. And I'm just going to keep saying that because every day I get up, I'm like, this place is beautiful. How is it?
Oh, it's amazing.
How is it that I'm so lucky to be here? So
I mean, Chicago's a great city, but I grew up in the Midwest. I mean, here you get up and, today I was out without a jacket. I mean, it's just amazing.
and it's interesting just to quickly juxtapose this to all these other areas where people say that it's perfect climate. You guys have them all beat. So I was in Los Angeles for my last assignment. And no, I was actually with related companies. And something that people don't realize, Los Angeles, and I was downtown Los Angeles, gets fog all the time. And people are like, oh, beautiful Southern California, and you're paying all this premium. And you're like, it's gray outside again.
Yeah.
So, the best kept secret, worst kept secret. I'm not sure what the right answer is.
Secret anymore.
Yeah. Crap, right? Is your family settled here already?
My family got here on Friday and my moving truck got here Saturday. And so that's how I have.
Are you in the neighborhood?
I've been here I can't measure it in hours anymore. That's too much math, but I've been here about a little over a month. I'm about 3.5, 4 miles from here.
Oh,
So
great.
don't ask me the name of the neighborhood. It's that direction, maybe. Cherry Creek. So, yeah, again, questions, any questions for me? Like I said, I'm so new that at this point, I'd probably have to go look up the answer anyway, but I'm just excited to be here. So really am.
Well, we have the steering committee has a long relationship with, because, and some folks, and you'll get to know everybody, but Bob was one of the original ones who negotiated when the mall was going in. So the steering committee still has a relationship, some contractual, like when they put in the e-chargers, they came here with the design and the information. So we'll try to be that great partner to you, and we thank you. You're welcome anytime.
Thank you.
And if there are any issues that I know Stuart Anderson, I think he's online here. He is with Transportation Solutions. I know that he was working with you all about, there he is. Hi, Stuart. Stuart was working with the mall, I think, on some bike storage and
Nice.
things on that. So you may not even have met Stuart yet, but we have a Transit Management Association system in Denver, and he is the head of the Transit Management Association for our area, including the mall and bid and everybody. So resources galore in this room. So
And I have to say, I'm a cyclist. Right, we didn't talk about hobbies, but I'm a cyclist as one of my hobbies. Huge selling point for this town. I was like, there are trails everywhere. And I don't feel like I'm gonna get run over every time I get on my bike.
Compared to LA cycling, it's a big difference.
Yeah, so true, so
Well,
true.
the guy right next to you there, Brooks, is a world-class cyclist and has biked a lot around the world in Italy and France and different places. So still,
That's a killer.
yeah. So, well, thank you. If you have any questions, please reach out to me.
Bill,
We have, I'll tell you a little, maybe we'll have coffee, maybe with Richard, and we'll tell you about the different representation on the steering committee
Excellent.
and how that works. So you know, who you have in front of you and who can help you, as you settle in.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much. I'm going to excuse myself because I got a lot to get back to, but I really just wanted to come and say hello and introduce myself in person. So
Thank your family for letting you come here while they have that.
well, I'll have to make up for it later. It'll probably be a dinner or something.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay,
You're next to
you too. You too. Thank you very, very much. I do want to I have a couple quick updates. Councilwoman, thank you for being here. I know we're going to let you catch your breath. Abe is here too. Thank you for being here. Couple quick updates. So many of you, remember, Nancelia Jackson. She lived over, her family lived over on Garfield and has been sort of a staple. If you look up on the Cherry Creek North YouTube channel or on our website, there's a history video that she is prominently featured in. She's been written about. She almost made it to 100 years old. And she passed, and her son, Judge Gary Jackson, now lives on the property where they had the family homestead. But and I think some of us have all talked about this, but Cherry Creek was a very heavily occupied African-American community. And the Jacksons are keeping this history alive. We did an article about Nancelia in our last newsletter honoring her death and made a contribution to an organization that she helped young African-American kids get through law school. They are rolling out a history of Cherry Creek and especially the African-American roots of Cherry Creek. And Judge Jackson and Cleo Parker Robinson. There are several I will be forgetting, but they are going to have a program in February. And of course, we would like to embrace that and wrap ourselves around that, make sure we get a lot of people there so people understand that that's where Cherry Creek started. So I want to just put a plug. I will send you all information as I get it. I met with Judge Jackson just a week ago to talk about this. He was also appointed by the governor for the America 250 Colorado 150, which will be coming up. He's also the head of that. So we will welcome him here and find out what that all means and how we all as good citizens can participate. But right now, just look to February and we will get him to come in January and talk to everybody about it. But I want to save the date and also get some people who might want to volunteer to work on this and just get the information and maybe help, whether we sponsor some snacks at the event or something like that. But please noodle it and let me know, and let's really embrace the history of our greater neighborhood with that. So I think now let me just go back up. Councilwoman, before we start on the agenda items that we've talked about, do you want to have any other updates to what's going on in your office?
Gosh, well, thanks. Sorry I was late, you guys. I was on Teams in my car, like driving over here like a crazy lady from planning board where Abe and I saw each other earlier today because our gas station text amendment, which would limit gas station development across Denver to certain specific buffer zones, passed planning board. Yeah, so, and I want to just acknowledge Owen because Owen and the staff members from Councilwoman Romero Campbell's office and Councilmember Cashman's office did all of the research, all of the initial background work, all of the conversations, everything. They did an amazing job. So good job, Owen. Congratulations. This is all you. So I'm happy to talk more about that, but I think really, you know, Abe's had a long day, so I would love to give him the floor and the opportunity to kind of talk through something that I requested come to the Cherry Creek Steering Committee. So a little bit of background here. We do like what are called text bundles, right? So we have this huge zoning code and it needs to be updated pretty regularly. But it takes a lot of work and a lot of time for those changes to get made. So CPD, Community Planning and Development, only does them in like giant piles. So we had a giant pile that recently came through. One of the recommended changes that was included in that text amendment bundle was a change to the makeup of the Cherry Creek Design Advisory Committee. And so I begged for that not to be included, so that we could properly stakeholder those changes. So, Abe is here tonight to kind of talk through the proposal with you all and get some feedback from you all. I know he's met with the bid as well. And I do want to be very clear that because it takes so much work for our staff to put through a text change, they're going to hold off on this change until additional text changes go through again. So this is not imminent, but I did want to, since, you know, the conversation had started, I did want to kind of have you guys hear about what's going on so that when it does move forward in the future, it does not take anyone by surprise and you've had an opportunity to hear about it and ask questions and give your feedback on it. So I will hand it over to Abe if that's okay with you.
I think also though, too, I just want to tell everybody, so there were kind of two pieces of things that you might have seen floating through if you're a notice party.
Yeah.
On your R&O information, and that is that the actual size and specifics of the design guidelines were recently passed by council. So since we met that passed, what that did is it created the design standards modified to meet the Cherry Creek West zoning specifics, and they are now included within that frame. So that passed. So if you saw anything about it, that's what that was. It's different than this.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. I was also confused on that. So, you know, just a lot going on in Cherry Creek, as we all know. But this one, so that did pass, that is done. And what that does is ensure that the Cherry Creek West buildings, as they are starting to be designed and built now, because the zoning is set on the land, the Cherry Creek design standards will be followed by Cherry Creek West, which is a big deal. That is done. This is separate. It is really about the makeup of the design advisory board in particular. So Abe, take it away.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And good to see you all. I'm Abe Barge. I'm the Code and Regulation Supervisor in Planning Services, which is kind of like the long-range planning part of community planning and development. And that basically just means I think about updating the rules that apply to development a lot, especially zoning rules. So as the Councilwoman gave a great introduction, key thing is, right, we're not actually proposing to do anything with the board at the moment. We did propose something and then took a step back and kind of realized we needed to have more conversation because we'd kind of made the proposal fairly 11th hour because the opportunities kind of to do these things efficiently don't come up that often, but it was too 11th hour. And so we acknowledge that.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. At some point, we would like to restart the conversation or keep the conversation going. So we'll fill you in on what we were thinking to see what questions you have or any thoughts you have. And then, yeah, just, you know, Councilman also clarified, like, this is, all these things are kind of related to each other, Cherry Creek West and the rezoning there and the design standards and guidelines, but they're also kind of separate actions from each other. So what we were talking about is an update to the rules in the zoning code for how the Cherry Creek North Design Advisory Board is set up. So Article 12 of the zoning code, if you're a zoning, is where these, where the board is created, basically the design advisory board. And this is kind of this is pretty special for Cherry Creek. Like most of the city, like private development is pretty much just subject to zoning rules in terms of like the height and design and location of buildings, as well as the building code, which are the kind of life safety things. But in some special places like downtown and definitely in historic districts and in Cherry Creek North, there's kind of a parallel set of rules about development that are more discretionary. So zoning tends to like, well, at least attempts to give yes or no answers about things like there's a height limit.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna laugh.
Yes, I mean, it is kind of attempts being the operative phrase. We really try to make it foolproof. It's pretty hard. It's, you know, you're just working on an amendment today. But yeah, those rules are attempt to be idiot proof, as in like if the height limit is 35 feet, you cannot build a 36-foot tall building. However, when design review applies, as it does in Cherry Creek North, that's a little bit more discretionary. Yes, you have to meet all the zoning rules, but there's also going to be a conversation about how you're doing it that's more qualitative and can be more flexible. So it can't say, if the height limit is 35 feet, it can't say, fine, your building's so great, build a 50-foot building. But, you know, the more discretionary conversation can be about like where you're putting, you know, the tallest parts of the building or things like that, according to more general guidance. And in the case of Cherry Creek North, there's a board that helps staff with the decision-making. So ultimately, staff have the final call still, but the Cherry Creek North Design Advisory Board makes a recommendation, and, you know, typically we follow pretty closely to those recommendations. And they use a set of adopted design standards and guidelines to make that. So that's just the history on the board that's enabled by the code.
Dave, can I add one other thing? We have
Yeah.
overlays too. As we work with you on Cherry Creek East.
Right. So in one part of Cherry Creek and Cherry Creek East, you know, Brooks was really instrumental in working with the then council person before it was in your district, Councilwoman Sawyer, to propose a zoning overlay. Now that is zoning. That's supposedly the idiot-proof thing. A way to add an extra, like more a place-specific layer to zoning. So there's some special rules in Cherry Creek East about how development.
Yeah, I just was well.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that. So the board, it turns out that, you know, as we look more closely at how the zoning code sets up that board, there's some kind of interesting specifics in there. One of them is that it says that the board of the Cherry Creek Business Improvement District specifically shall nominate the folks that the mayor would then consider appointing to the board. Turns out that, you know, there are well over 100 boards and commissions in the city, and that's the only one that's set up in that way, that has another agency that's part of the process of saying who will be on the board, which makes a certain amount of sense on the one hand. On the other hand, it also kind of complicates things by having two independent agencies that then have to agree with each other basically on who gets appointed. And so there was the thinking that we should probably streamline that and make it more consistent with the other boards and commissions in the city. Then, like looking more closely, the code also sets up like what the positions on the board are. So it says there shall be 7 members, and then it says which kinds of qualifications the 7 members have to have. And so, for example, it says that there have to be 3 licensed architects and 1 licensed landscape architect. And that's great too. We do want design expertise on the board. However, there are a lot of things we want on the board. We want community representation. You know, we want folks that are part of the conversation in the area. We want diversity on the board. That's a big thing. And you know, that can be hard to accomplish. And when you have these really set qualifications, like they have to be, a pretty big set of board members have to have these really specific qualifications, it rules some people out who otherwise would be great. Like they have some design expertise, they're just not licensed landscape architects, they're really involved in the community, that kind of thing. So we thought, really we should generalize that a little bit more in order to make it easier to recruit and to maintain a diverse board for Cherry Creek North. Then the final thing was just kind of a housekeeping thing that kind of does relate to all these other things that are happening, specifically Cherry Creek West, that all the language about the board, it's literally called the Cherry Creek North Design Advisory Board. It says, that it has purview over wherever our separately adopted rules and regulations says it does. So when we updated the design standards and guidelines, as the councilwoman was saying, to include Cherry Creek West, that gave the Cherry Creek North Board the authority to do that review. But it's maybe a little bit, over time might be hard for people to understand, like, oh, it's the Cherry Creek North Board, but they actually do things that are not technically in Cherry Creek North. So we were thinking, we thought, well, actually, it should probably just be called the Cherry Creek Design Advisory Board. That might be confusing too, because technically they don't review projects in Cherry Creek East. But now we have time for that conversation. Like, what should the board be called, basically, or other things like that. So
Or maybe they should.
Right? So that's really kind of the update on the conversation that we've had. If you really want to get into details, I can share what the zoning language actually looks like, but you probably don't want to see that because
I don't know, this group might want to see that. We're pretty involved around here.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of zoning nerds.
Yep.
And-
Well, I'll join teams.
I
just
have
in
a
case.
question.
So look at the real.
Yeah. Will August still be the primary contact with the city?
What is that?
Will August still be the primary contact?
And who is that?
Olga.
Olga. Oh, I'm sorry. Right. She
I don't
is
enunciate well.
sorry. She is the primary staff person to the board, and right, that doesn't change. And
Okay.
even if we carry forward with this proposal.
Because she's great. Let me just say.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. And the zoning code doesn't specifically say who has to be the staff person. That's just kind of an administrative thing.
But she has a lot of good history. Sure.
She does. Yeah.
I had a brief discussion with Olga during the Cherry Creek West process. And I think one of the things that came up that all of us had a stakeholder in is that there is no sort of stakeholder representation that isn't commercially kind of oriented on the design committee right now. And that would be the one thing that when you're looking at it, I don't want to get in the weeds right now, but that would be our main thrust would be to get some non-commercially oriented, stakeholders that are affected by every decision that they make. A voice of some kind.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that maybe gets back to the sort of relationship of the business improvement district specifically nominating the members and then the mayor's office selecting from there, that we could, realistically, staff and community planning and development would go out, really try to get the word out about a board opening and then look for community representation and without, necessarily having to correspond with the business improvement district until we'd kind of selected oh, this person really does, have the expertise that they would need in order to review projects and they're very involved in the community and would be a great addition to the board and we could
Well, you may or may not be aware, but just recently, the Cherry Creek Committee, or Steering Committee, appointed or recommended one of our members, Mary, who is an architect, as sort of a community liaison, because we never had any kind of communication, feedback, or otherwise with the DAB historically. They did their Mary thing, and we kind of said, "Oh wow, look at that."
Although I will say that in past years, CPD had people used to come into the neighborhoods. We had someone who showed up at the R&O meetings, at the steering committee meetings, and we've all said we really would like more of a relationship with CPD as somebody that impacts. And Olga has been that person. But for Olga, we wouldn't have had a say with the electric vehicle issues with the mall because she knew that was important to us. So having that somebody from CPD that will engage more with us, whether it's on the DAB, which is why, and Mary has been on the design advisory board before. So we encouraged her and she agreed to apply again, and her name is still processing through. So we hope that happens. But, you know, we need more direct links with CPD. And we're lucky because Councilwoman Sawyer shows up. She participates. She keeps us, you know, informed of what's going on. But we really encourage that relationship all the more, as much as we can get it.
And that's especially important as the purview of the design advisory board seems to be creeping, getting larger, including Cherry Creek West. And at some point, perhaps with the development of the new center or the existing center over the years, it'll include that area as well and gradually kind of absorb a much larger role in the community.
To touch on a perspective here that I think everybody needs to hear. I sit in every single design advisory board meeting. I'm not on the board. I'm the bid representative. I'm in here. We have somebody from our board on in that group. I will tell you hands down, without a doubt, the buildings that are proposed to us initially are not the buildings that we build. You know, we build different buildings because we have licensed architects. We have licensed landscape architects. We have real professionals on that board. I'm not a professional architect. When I come in, it is nice to be a fly on the wall because the amount of stuff that I learn at that meeting, how these architects visualize these buildings, how they see, how they talk about the pedestrian scale, how they really impact the design. Those technical expertise are very important. I'd say they're paramount to this entire process. And I personally would not like to think in the bid's perspective on it is that we want licensed architects on that board. Not only do we want licensed architects, we want senior licensed architects. When somebody builds a building in Cherry Creek, they don't send a second-year architect here to propose this building in front of the design board. They send a senior person, a titan of the industry. I need another senior person, a titan of the industry to challenge them on their design and say, hey, we need to look at it this way. Hey, have you thought about that? And that is probably the most important piece of this design advisory board from our perspective. And I sit in every meeting. And so I think the lowering of those standards would be a grave mistake to what you will see in this community. It will lead to buildings. And I can tell you, I was looking at one last night, the Waldorf building. Their initial building was beautiful. It was a good building. Those architects looked at it and they said, well, you know, that it's kind of like a hat, you know, that bottom's too light there. And, you know, it's not a lot of structure on the bottom. So you need to kind of fill this in. You need to make, and these are nuanced changes that if somebody doesn't have those expertise and they haven't done it for a long time, they're not going to pick up on those things because I certainly don't know how to articulate that. I don't really know what I'm looking at half the time or how those changes will impact things. But, you know, our perspective on that, and I will say is that it is very, very important that we have senior architects. And, you know, I wouldn't be opposed to a community member being on that board, but I would say when it comes down to having a licensed architect, a good licensed architect, a landscape architect, these are decisions, these are conversations that we challenge folks with. People come to build buildings from all over the world here. People come from Florida to build buildings here. They come from Chicago to build buildings here. Not everybody's built in Denver, and people don't understand Cherry Creek. And that board is made up of people that are plugged into Cherry Creek. You know,
Richard, let me add on to what you're saying. Cherry Creek is not just buildings, and that's one of the problems.
Yeah.
Buildings are kind of objects, but it's the kind of the society and the social networks, all the things that go into the kind of culture of Cherry Creek. And you need people to also not just say, oh, those columns are too skinny, or those balconies are too narrow, or whatever. You also need people to say, that land use or that opportunity is not going to be appropriate with this. And that pedestrian way may enhance the community greater if it were here, or this connection across First. So there's a lot of
absolutely agree. You know, looking at the open space,
I don't like that.
How does that open space correlate?
I'd like to pick up on what Bob is saying, because It's also how the building relates to the street.
Yeah.
And how it relates to its environment. And I think that's gonna be so important with Cherry Creek West because of the fact that we haven't really nailed it down. So it's not just about buildings and signage and materials.
Absolutely.
It's about the relationship of one building to another.
And it's about the relationship to the pedestrian.
Relates pedestrians.
Absolutely. And that's what we have on that committee right now. We have professionals that do that. And then could that be expanded upon? Absolutely. But I would say, and I'll just put it this way, the dumbing down of that committee is not something that I think we want to experience at all.
For example, a nuance of this, and I've sat through many of them, but that's when you just realize that having these senior people that really know what they're doing has benefited all of us. And because we don't all know your language and the little things like the fact that, you know, there's some trade-off for open space. You may get some fill in on the zoning side. Those little spaces throughout our neighborhood are places where people gather. They're little public accessible parks. They're small, but you can get your Starbucks and go sit underneath, you know, in the financial center and there's a fire pit. That's public space.
Yeah.
And somebody who is not really familiar with those specifics and where they are and how they work would not be a good fit.
Yeah.
And we want to make this so that, I mean, they're all volunteers. And it's a heavy lift because you have to look at a lot of stuff. So we want to make sure it's sophisticated enough so that it's a resume benefit for them. They don't get paid, right?
Yep.
So they don't want to sit on a board that, you know, the really good ones with somebody like, you know, who's brought in, who's doesn't know a thing about architecture or construction.
When we look
So-
at that open space, a perfect call. When we looked at the Waldorf building the first time, you know, you have a certain percentage of open space we need to have. And the really conversation out of the room was, is that really open space? That doesn't feel like open
No,
space.
it was a
We need
driveway.
to look about it, how the pedestrian, and that comes out of this board and that level of expertise. So I would just say my caution to the city and my caution to this room is we need to really think this one through and we need to make sure that we keep real professionals because that person presenting up there is a senior architect. And let me tell you, I don't feel comfortable challenging their architecture.
That was yet to have.
I need to have a respected peer that can look at it and challenge that and can really drive that conversation. And I would just touch on that, you know, I would say, you know, the CCN bid board does submit those nominees. I would just take you through that process. You know, our outgoing person that was the chair of that board is Brian Klipp. He's no longer on that board. I've contracted with Brian to be our person in the room to give us the opinion because I want an architect there review those other architects. So I'm actually bringing in professionals that will then give that recommendation to our board that will then nominate those people. And I think that those controls there are very important to the neighborhood. And I think it's why it's been successful. And I understand that that doesn't happen in every board in the city, but I will say this, Cherry Creek is a special place, you know, and I think we need to keep it special. And I think that the amount of work that our volunteers and I would say that the bid staff put into this neighborhood, you know, I think that that's important and nobody looks out for ourselves like ourselves. And I think that is really important that those nominees come from Cherry Creek.
Well, I think the bottom line is the quality of that board will be reflected in the quality of the development of Cherry Creek.
Absolutely.
Why the city is looking at this since the board seems to be functioning and has been functioning really well for a long time. So can you just give me a sense of why all of a sudden the city has decided that they want to change it?
Well, we're kind of on pause with that, but
I know.
yeah, there are some reasons why we thought that. And well, let me just first say, like, I agree with pretty much everything I've heard here. Like, this is the balance that we're trying to strike, and that, you know, definitely I've seen firsthand how, like, having some really high-powered design expertise on a board like that really helps when you get the applicants who are bringing the designs that are not quite up to snuff, because they'll hear about it, and there's a lot of confidence from the, you know, the design hotshots. I think, like, when we talked about having not quite so many specific qualifications in the zoning code. It's not because we thought that the board shouldn't still have a very accomplished designers on it. It's just more flexibility to be able to appoint a community representative or something like that who didn't technically have all of that expertise. But finally, like circling back around to your question, I think so ultimately the mayor needs to make the appointments, and that's the same with all of the other boards and commissions. And the mayor is really looking for a certain amount of diversity across the whole board and, you know, various other considerations. And that there has been kind of a challenge with that. It's certainly not just in Cherry Creek, it's, you know, with all of the appointments that we're trying to make. And so it's just basically removing whatever barriers there may be to considering a broad candidate pool, basically is why we wanted to have the conversation. I think in the end, it's not to say that there's something really wrong with the way that the board has been operating. And clearly, when you walk around, you can see the results, as everybody's talking about. Like, there's a lot of really great quality design in Cherry Creek North that you don't necessarily see in the rest of the city.
I would just say it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Just.
There are plenty of great architects that fit the diversity, you know, puzzle piece of this, you know, and I don't think losing those qualifications should even be a conversation. I think, do we add a community member? You know, we have a retailer, we recruit a retailer to be on that board. A Cherry Creek retailer is represented on that board. Should there be a position from the Cherry Creek Neighborhood Association on that board? I think that's a fair question and something that should be looked at, but just remove or steering committee or the RNO, you know, but I really think that removing those technical qualifications will result in, I've never seen one project come through that we said yes to, or the board has said yes to. Every project, no matter how good it is, gets better. And it gets better because of those expertise.
One point I'd like to make though, is those architects with those qualifications, you need to be sure you have some from the neighborhood. Brian lives in the neighborhood.
Absolutely.
Chris Dunn used to live in the neighborhood.
Yep.
So there are those who walk the neighborhood on a regular basis that really know it. If you bring a qualified architect who's been doing high-rise buildings downtown or the lower downtown, he may have a totally different perception of the scale and what's special about Cherry Creek versus what's special about Larimer Square, for example.
Yep.
So I just wanted to make that point.
I think couldn't agree with you more. You know, I spent a lot of time with Brian over the last few years because we walk the neighborhood and we say, that sign didn't come through design board. You know, we have to talk to the city about that. You know, Chris, I actually talked to Chris yesterday. You know, still plugged into the neighborhood. You know, we have great architects sitting across from me that, you know, get the neighborhood and they get Cherry Creek. And I think that is a level of protection that I would say the bid board brings to this process.
They kind of live the creek.
We live it. I mean, this is our community. This is our home. And I know it's everybody in the city's home, but Cherry Creek's a special place. And this is, I think, nobody protects Cherry Creek and is more invested in Cherry Creek than the people sitting around this table.
Richard, I'd like to go back to Brooks's comment about Cherry Creek East. And hear a little bit from you all. What do you think about the idea of Cherry Creek Design Advisory Board applying to all of Cherry Creek?
Let me see if two of our members, Bill Tanner and Bill Allen, are on. I'd like to get their opinion too, but we have so many issues that have come out of the design guidelines. When we work with Chris Gleisner on the area plan, that time we had, and you know this, we had design guidelines. When I became the president of Cherry Creek East, one of the first things that Chris told me after we had the plan adopted was that we will go back and refine those and continue with them. They got dropped. They got dropped because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it would require a board, they decided. And we already had the Cherry Creek Design Advisory Board, but it was never discussed could they also have impact on Cherry Creek East? And what happened is the form-based zoning came in. The form-based now, we have a bunch of boxes. And I designed 10 units that we put a lot of money into that are a courtyard that I think is very successful. That courtyard type was dropped as a type. So some of the character that was already there and you live in a courtyard? We have 3 or 4 courtyard projects in Cherry Creek East. So the character that was developed through those guidelines was what really establishes what we have now. But all of a sudden, we're getting boxes and under the existing zoning that don't have any connection or integrity. And we also have a pedestrian streetlight program.
We're gonna talk about that in
Yeah.
1 second. I've got something else to talk about, but
There's so much good stuff here.
I'm gonna could be a little bit because we're coming up on 6 o'clock.
I'm sorry, it's just
No,
my chance to get on my box.
No, I understand.
Passionate about this.
And I lived in Cherry Creek. I developed real estate in Cherry Creek.
I know, man.
2 large projects
I know.
and lived with it. And Brooks and I have been talking about this forever because most of Cherry Creek, they're all PUDs. Because, but it was really after that. And I helped work on a lot of the stuff you're talking about when I was on the board in Cherry Creek East. But and when you look at where the bid ends, at the alley at Steel, between Steel and Adams in the alley, the new project that is going in, we have a developer and community benefit agreement on that project. And they agreed to adopt and utilize the Cherry Creek design guidelines. They are not part of the review, but it's still something where we have a specific provision in that document that we negotiated with them to say, here are the guidelines. You need to make sure your architects understand them and you build to them because we have all this CMX property. And so I think we'll pick this up as we go along and we have to be sensitive to the fact that that we have to be careful about the language because we don't want there to be any suggestion that the design guidelines would apply to somebody building their own single family home or a duplex. That these are design, if you read the design guidelines, they're specific to really commercial. And so your overlay and some things like that, are there other ways to get there? But I think we really appreciate you coming. I hope that this has helped you see how important this issue is to this steering committee and to these neighborhoods who consider this to be their core area, whether it's country club or hilltop. This is where people come to eat, to shop, to meet people for coffee. This is very important to this greater area. And we have applauded our design review board because they've done such an amazing job. And I'm glad you kept Brian Clip on for even, I think he was termed off.
He was termed off, but
He was
he can help,
termed off.
we can hire him to do interviews.
Yeah.
Because we want
so-
a senior architect doing it.
Yeah, and so, those folks, we have talent on this board, numerous architects, developer, I like to think of myself as a frustrated architect, but that's because when you write big checks to build things, yeah, you care about it. So everybody cares about the issue, probably more than maybe if this was just a random inconsistent board articulation in the code.
so
Great discussion.
what I'd like to do, if you all are amenable to it and CPD is amenable to it, is continue this conversation. Because I think there are some bigger, if we are going to take this opportunity to sort of change this scheme, let's be really thoughtful about it, because I think there are some adjacent issues that we kind of also need to consider at the same time. So I really appreciate you pushing pause on it so that we could start the conversation tonight. But I do think we need to continue the conversation, and Cherry Creek East needs to have a conversation with their, community and talk through those kinds of things as well. So can we maybe reconnect after the first of the year and figure out if there's a way to take a look at all of these things at the same time?
Yes, and I'll write up some notes to report back to the mayor's office. Esther and the mayor's office of boards and commissions will be interested in everything you have to say.
Yeah, and we welcome her anytime. I know she was in our email chain, so great. And we'll send the meeting minutes around, so if she wants to, and the video.
So if you have time, it looks like Bill is probably trying to get in, Bill Tanner.
Yeah, just very briefly, yeah, Cherry Creek East is a bit of a different neighborhood from the bid. There's an area on the west side of Cherry Creek East going from Madison to Steel Street, which is more of a commercial area. So it might be worth a conversation, but I suspect that that area is different enough from the bid that I'm not sure whether the advisory board would apply or not. We'd have to take a look at what the pros and cons are, what the benefits are, and go from there.
Well, you have to start with you have to look at what the design, the board is there to implement the guidelines. So if the guidelines don't fit, they don't fit residential. So it's not all Cherry Creek North, right? It's not. So we ought to be thoughtful about it, but certainly as much of Cherry Creek East that has developed out. And with their overlay, you wonder if there's even room for the guidelines or whether it even applies. So I think you're right, Bill. I personally, who have looked at this and sat on Cherry Creek East board for many, many years and developed myself in there and looked at so many projects when we were moving them through under PUDs. I can't see, knowing the guidelines, that would even fit. But that's where you need to start, not the board. It's what are the standards that the board is implementing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you
more to
very
come.
much for the discussion. It's important to us. So thank you, Abe. And we know we'll see you back. I'll get you this information. You are welcome to stay, or you are welcome to go home. Let me guess.
I would just say just a big thank you to their team for the work with the Cherry Creek
Yes.
West project and updating those standards and guidelines to incorporate that project in. Because it's a big ask of the design advisory board to do that, and a big ask of the city to create these standards that really could marry this and have a new sub-district in there. So thank you for that hard work.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of thought went into that. And I think
Yeah.
we'll have beautiful buildings and a beautiful community because of it.
I'm excited.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you very, very much. I do want to do another thank you to city folks and Councilwoman Sawyer. Annette and I served on the CCNNA small committee that worked on our parking regulations. Cherry Creek East has not yet been brought into that. So, but the ones that have been approved by our board to move forward were really negotiated, and without Councilwoman Sawyer and Annette and I were primarily involved. And we talked about this the other day, that without her office coming in and saying, can we please get together in my office? Don't make me come back there kind of tone, in my office. And the folks at Dottie really worked with us and came to some compromises, changed some of their recommendations to address the material concerns that we had. And we just sent an email back to the team at Dottie saying that this compromise was approved by our board to move forward. I'm sure, like anything, there are a lot of residents who are still not going to like it. And there are some things they said, we're going to watch. If it doesn't work, we'll we'll agree to come back and look at it. But without Councilwoman Sawyer's help, we would not have gotten to the table, and without the real dedicated focus that Annette and others had to really look at this. We took this out to our entire community. We did a survey through Councilwoman's office, where we really educated people in the neighborhood who were subject to these parking issues. And we got a lot of input. So it just goes to show how when you put in the work and you are transparent and you open it up and you have really good representatives and good city staff to sit down, you can come up with some compromises that work. So thank you for that.
Thank you, guys.
It was.
You did the heavy lift on that one.
Well, I think actually
2.5.
Owen did a lot.
Yeah, I'm gonna shout out to Owen on this one too.
Did you have anything you wanted to add,
Just
Annette?
that only 2.5 years.
Yeah, right. Well, that's just it. Sometimes you just.
Sometimes
stick
it takes
with
it.
And so that's one thing. I think we wanted to take, we have 20 minutes left. And I think we wanted to talk a little, I don't know if I'll just set the stage and turn it over to you.
Yeah.
So at the, we have a couple of members that the steering committee, transportation solution, the bid, a number of people who have floated from time to time the idea of a JID. JID is General Improvement District. So the bid, which is a business improvement district, and I'm not going to put my lawyer hat on. I'm going to try to keep this just separate. These are legal entities under our code. And they have differences and different responsibilities. They have different boards. We don't have a JID in this area. We have a bid. The bid has its specific area where it is able to basically tax, collect fees from. It's commercial interests, not the residents who are going to live in the Waldorf. They're going to pay taxes and everything else, but they're not going to pay into the bid fees. Similarly, all the residents who enjoy a lot of what benefits the bid provides in all this beautiful landscaping and its lights, we don't pay for that. That is paid for by the people who pay into the bid. So there are obviously items of concern, issues that have been brought up over the years. We've all talked about them, that, crime being one of them. We all who were really close to the bid benefit from some of these, from the cameras and the people or the security people who drive around. But it doesn't reach everywhere. Country Club has their own services that they, I assume, raise through their dues. But in our statistical neighborhood, which is Cherry Creek North through Cherry Creek East, it stops at Alameda, so it does not go down into the triangle. But we've looked from time to time at whether a general improvement district would solve some issues. And discussions have been ongoing. Councilwoman Sawyer has been the command center. She's brought these people together. We've talked about it. We've talked a little bit, but we wanted to at least make sure that this group knows, because it really, these are things that will, if we did a JID, it would benefit Country Club. It would benefit Hilltop, but they would not be paying into it. It would be the residents, if it's approved, because it has to go to a vote. It's quite a process. It's an investment. And I will try to get some information. I'm writing for INC. I'm writing summaries of what these are, so people understand the opportunities for neighborhoods to think about these things. We've been complaining for a long time about paying really high taxes and not really seeing the money coming back into the neighborhood. But if we think about issues like a commuter maybe, or pedestrian lighting, or better sidewalks, better, things, cameras, the cloud cameras. those are things that could be paid for in a JIT. I think there's discussion in the group where, you know, there have been suggestions that maybe this would also pay for things like intersections or creek improvements. And I think some of us say that, you know, the city should be doing that. You know, we spent 3 years working on Denver Moves Cherry Creek to get some of these changes. The city ought to be now talking about those. And so that's a process. And that was my introduction. And Councilwoman, I think, wanted to make sure. Go take it over here.
Yeah, thanks, Lou. And so that was a really good kind of overview and I really appreciate it. I want to sort of give you a little bit of additional background. So, right when we came into office, right, I took over Cherry Creek from Councilmember Hines when the neighborhood went over to District 5 from District 10 in redistricting, which happens every 10 years. And I really, because you were new to me, I really wanted to do outreach to the community to find out what you care about. Right? Because I always try very hard to make sure I'm doing what you care about. By the way, our annual survey closes December 31st. If you have not taken it yet, please do. That is how we know sort of every year what it is that you guys care about. And we read the comments. And lots of times people are really mean in those comments. It's okay. We read them anyway. But what we heard from residents of Cherry Creek, and I mean the Cherry Creek statistical neighborhood. So I think most people here know what that means, but you know, there are 78 statistical neighborhoods in the city of Denver. They were created in the 1970s to track census data. Those boundaries never change. So Cherry Creek, it's University to Colorado, 6th Avenue to Alameda, /First. What we heard from the Cherry Creek statistical neighborhood was really, really interesting in a couple of different ways. Number one, we heard loud and clear your resentment for the fact that you do not receive this investment in the community of Cherry Creek that you put out. Cherry Creek is the #1 revenue driver per capita in the city and county of Denver. It is based on the number of people who live here. It is a bigger revenue driver than downtown. It is a bigger revenue driver than the airport. It is, even if you take out the per capita part of that, it's the #2 revenue driver in the city and county of Denver, above the airport and only below downtown. The amount of investment that happens from the city is almost nothing. And that is not okay. And I hear you on that. And I agree with you on that. And it ticks me off as much as it ticks you off. I believe that the city should be investing more in our neighborhood, because when you have an extraordinary asset like what we have here in Cherry Creek, you have to invest in it so that it continues to be an extraordinary asset. I speak loudly and longly about this regularly to everyone who will hear me in the city and county of Denver. It's not going particularly well thus far. However, the other thing that we heard in the survey from our residents that we thought was very, very interesting and new and different is you guys are asking for and would like to see things that the city will never pay for. So let me give you a couple of examples. The bid does an extraordinary job of community safety. Richard, you are amazing. Thank you so much for this. One of the things the bid does is they pay for a security service to drive around the neighborhood. We heard in that community survey that residents of Cherry Creek statistical neighborhood outside the 16 blocks of the bid would like to see some sort of service like that throughout the neighborhood. It's not something the city is ever going to pay for. We heard about the lighting in Cherry Creek East and the fact that there are lights that were put up historically that are literally plugged into people's garages. And that's legit how they are maintained to this point, right? We also heard from residents in Cherry Creek North that they are afraid to walk home at night from the business and from dinner in the business improvement district, particularly when it's dark outside, because the bid does this extraordinary job of lighting within the bid, but it doesn't go up into the neighborhoods, right? So we could do something like, take care of the lights down in Cherry Creek East, build off of that original grid and build out a lighting grid like that throughout the statistical neighborhood of Cherry Creek. The city will never pay for something like that. Though these are sort of additional things that we heard from the residents of Cherry Creek that you would like to see in your neighborhood to make your neighborhood a better place to live. The way to do that is to tax ourselves to do it. Now, this is a Tabor question. It would have to go to the voters. And therefore, there has to be significant conversation within the community to find out more, right? These are a couple of the things that floated to the top from that survey. I imagine that there are more. We want to hear those kinds of things, and we would like to start that conversation with the community. I don't want to start that conversation with the community until we have this conversation, right? Until I hear from you all. What do you think? Is this something that we should pursue? Is this something that we should start with? Is it something where residents might be, depending on what we sort of hear in feedback, willing to pay for some of these additional things that the city will never pay for, but that we hear you want? I don't know. So I wanted to at least broach the conversation with you and get some feedback from you all and see, what do you think? Should we start to have some community conversations about this, or, you know, recognizing that property taxes have gone up? Is it something that you're just absolutely not willing to even consider paying for, given that it's very expensive to live in Denver right now, which I acknowledge and support.
We have had these
About structure.
conversations though for years.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And it says in the Cherry Creek area plan
Yeah.
from 2010, create a JID. So the plan support is there for this. It's not a new conversation. I believe that this is the right way for us to go. So I have put in the effort and energy to start talking about it and asking about it. I'm at a place now where, like, you need to be able to say that. I don't live in Cherry Creek.
I have a question regarding structure of the. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe, but I thought a GID was different than a normal district in that it required a vote of the residents.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yep.
Not.
Not the entire city, just the.
So if you look,
Yes, renters are included.
if you look at Cherry Creek.
Yep.
And the number of renters.
Yep.
And you think about how if it were promoted right, renters really don't think they have anything to lose and a lot to gain. Well, the rents may go up over time, but at the moment, they're not paying anything.
So I will tell you, because I'm me,
Yeah.
you guys know me. I did some background work to try and get an expert to tell me more about the Cherry Creek neighborhood. When she did the analysis, she removed the commercial properties that pay into the bid. So because they already pay into the bid, we're not going to ask them to pay into a general improvement district too, right? For the remaining properties, the split is 52% residential, 48% commercial in the Cherry Creek statistical neighborhood, right? Based on current assessed property values, 1 mil would end up, 1 mil on $1 million of assessed value would end up being a little over $500 a year. She, kind of broke it out for me up to 5 mils, because anything more than that is just ridiculous. So there are different things we could do, different things, different amounts that we could charge, different, all kinds of different ways to skin this cat to get what we want. Right now, we don't know what we want. And what I would like to do is start with a conversation where I hear from you all, what would you want? What would you be willing to pay for, if anything, in a general improvement district? And I will say, I want to acknowledge that the bid is in a really difficult position because their businesses pay into the business improvement district. They tax themselves to pay into the business improvement district. But the residential properties within the business improvement district by state statute cannot be taxed. So there are residents who live in the bid area who do not pay into the bid. They could and would be, under this proposal, as it stands right now, pay into the general improvement district, so that they would be doing that as well. So there's a lot of moving parts. If we were going to do this, we would hire a consultant who has the expertise and background in this. I've already talked to several, but I want to present it to you all, get some thoughts on it, and it will be a sacrifice for the council office in terms of our budget to invest in the community outreach piece and data analysis piece of this in 2025. And that's okay. I'm willing to do it. But if you guys are not interested, then I'm going to hire a marketing and communications aide in January and take work off of all of our plates. So
Yeah, Bill with a comment.
I think, I like the idea, frankly. But I think to persuade people, they're going to want to know, they're going to be somewhat parochial, okay, in terms of, well, what do I get in my neighborhood? And it's important to be able to address that and explain to people why and what they're expected, what they should expect. Another question people will have is, well, why doesn't the city of Denver spend the money in the Cherry Creek area? Where is the opposition coming from and what's the probability of getting that money? And I think we have to be fairly clear and realistic about that.
So one thing though, remember that the kinds of things that we're talking about are not things the city pays for, like pedestrian lighting. They don't pay for that. If we were talking about a commuter, like just something that drove through the neighborhood or having access to something like that, city doesn't pay for that. I think maybe they have a couple, the one in Montbello is paid for.
that's a little bit different. It's paid for by the city. It's an on-demand service. So, and I want to just be very clear. I'm going to answer your question, Bill. Equity.
Mhm.
When you look at particularly transportation equity, but equity in general across the city of Denver, and with the federal government, let's talk transportation equity as a good example. Those dollars are attached to the point of origin. And so the point of origin has to fall into specific equity criteria in order to receive that additional investment. And because the point of origin is Cherry Creek, the number 2 revenue driver in the city and county of Denver, we do not meet the equity criteria that we would need to meet in order to get that additional investment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand that. I think that's a good point. But I think what I would suggest is that we need like a clear written statement as to covering the issues. Okay. And you've just discussed one, obviously, but why the city of Denver is not going to provide the money, because people are going to first of all say, well, I pay my taxes. Okay. Well, the logical thing here is actually succession. It's almost like in the other cities I've lived in, like Dallas and Houston, wealthy neighborhoods basically are not a part of the city, for that reason. I'm
Yeah,
not saying,
so Bill,
not
I just want to remind you,
yeah. I
what
get
we
that.
heard from residents was a desire for things that the city
Yeah.
will not pay for, right? The city doesn't
Right.
do lighting
Mhm.
schemes. The city doesn't pay for private security cars to drive around the neighborhood. The city doesn't pay
Yeah.
for those kinds of things, right? So
Gotcha.
I just want to be very clear, we're talking about 2 different issues here.
Yeah.
And a general improvement district would look at those kinds of things we heard from residents you want to see, that the
Yeah.
city will not ever pay for. That's not what a city does. We don't put private security in places.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And we've only got 2 minutes left.
I would say that, sorry, Lou.
I'm
I
gonna
mean,
bring
to
it
cut
to
to
a
the
close.
chase here is, people are gonna wanna know, we want lighting in Cherry Creek North. How much is it going to cost, really?
So
How much money are
The
we going to
consultant,
have?
yeah, that's what the consultant would do.
Maybe Cherry Creek East doesn't want the lighting, and how do you make those decisions? And for me, it's, you can promise all kinds of things, but you gotta tell me how much it's really gonna cost.
So, and that's, I think, the challenge. We don't even know what you want, so we can't cost it out.
So we've only got a minute left here.
Yeah.
And I'm very strict on the time.
Yes, you are.
So I want to bring this, I think the purpose of this was to start the conversation. So what we would have to do to go to the next step, and this is what Councilman and I talked about, is that even though it's statistical neighborhoods, we know that people in Hilltop, for example, if there's a commuter, they're going to walk across the street if there's a commuter, and they're going to, that this area will benefit, but the taxes will be within the statistical neighborhood. So we have to think about, what do people want? And I think what we'll work on next, if this group says, yeah, let's go to the next step, is to look at, here are the things that we would think, rank these. Would you want a commuter? Would you want your sidewalks fixed before this, somebody to come and repair them so they're safe? Pedestrian lighting, cloud cameras, a driver. Rank these things that the city will not pay for. Maybe increased, if we actually get a space to do our gateway improvements. Would they be art? Those are the kinds of things that the city won't pay for. We have it in our plan, the concept of those. And then get this out, roll it out, and see if, first of all, people want it, knowing that, would you be willing to pay some increase to get these benefits? And if so, what are they? So just by a show of hands, because it's 6:30, we've been working on this for a long time. Stuart Anderson has been on this committee as well. And Richard, of course. And so we've had these conversations. I think Nick usually shows up because he's pretty passionate about the fact that there are all these people that live here how did you put it? Whose dogs ruin the landscaping, but they don't pay for the landscaping?
We have some residential challenges. I'll tell you, our public safety team responds to more residential calls than anything else, and we're happy to do it because it's about community.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, we can't get that outside the bid boundaries.
Yeah. So by a show of hands, who wants us to put together something so that you can roll it out in your RNOs and take this information, come back, and then we'll talk about timelines, we'll talk about process, we'll talk about the questions, and we'll get some sort of a uniform survey that I assume that Councilwoman Sawyer would be able to host for us. Yep. So who thinks there would be enough interest in their areas to move forward with the concept of a JIT?
Well, I think our neighborhood would.
I mean, you want country club people to vote on this, because I'm not sure we're a part of this. Yeah.
You will be benefiting.
Yeah.
And the conversation is going to be a big one.
Yeah.
So it's more support through.
I mean, I would just say we did explore this about 10, 12 years ago, and we actually talked to the city about it, but we decided not to.
In the form of a special improvement district. And you're creating another quasi-governmental entity. It's basically a big homeowners association with all the associated problems of homeowners associations.
Not legally, but.
Yeah, not really.
Yeah, not really. So what it does though, is it allows those people within that area to be taxed for specific improvements. So, and we would be talking about specific improvements. So, but it looks like there's enough from Cherry Creek East. Any hands out there from the Cherry Creek East folks?
And I'd like to just add one thing though, because to dovetail what Annette said, having been involved in actually putting up a 5 Points Business Improvement District, I did that. And then also was working with Rhino and understood when they did a JIT and they did a BID, we actually took that conversation to the Curtis Park 5 Points area and they rejected the GID, right? They didn't want to do it. I think it's important that you put money. I know we're not asking you to say it's absolutely going to cost $10.
Yeah.
You have to give a range so that they understand how to prioritize. Do I put safety first at 2.5 million? Do I put a transportation circular at 5.7 million? Just give us some money aspects to it, right?
Yeah,
I just do a survey, say these are your top 5.
No. We
You
have
need to have.
We have a consultant who has done this before,
Okay.
who actually worked in the Rhino JID, and recently just worked on the ballpark JID, yeah.
But make sure, that's the only thing, because it's
So
so important.
I am not the expert at this. We need an adult in the room to be able to manage this, and we that's where our dollars would go to in 2025, would be to hire her to have these conversations with the community. But I'm not gonna do that if it's not worth it.
No, I think this is a 2025 look, because this will be a lift, and for her budget and for all of us, the energy that it will take to really look at that and to find somebody to actually with enough expertise to put some dollars and to prioritize what those are. If it's 1 mil or it's 2 mil, what would that really, what's the resulting budget and what would that pool of money be able to pay for? And then what are your priorities? Because this is it's not going to happen in 1 year, but it sounds like, I don't know if those hands are up on Teams with questions or just we are
over time.
time. So if you do have questions, please send an email to me with the questions. Our subgroup that's been working on this for some time will pick those up, but it sounds like there's enough interest in at least exploring it further. So, but if there are questions online, please send them to me. And with that, we are adjourned. Happy holidays, everybody. Be safe. Happy New Year. We got a lot to do next year. So
Quick housekeeping, if you raised your chair, can you lower it so I can put them all in? We have a meeting here in the morning.
you lower it and push it in, so she doesn't have to.
Congrats on gas stations.
Thank you.
My connection with that, was it? Yes.
Where are you on it?
For your conditions.
No, it was, so they, you guys added a condition just so you make sure.
They're definitely just gonna happen. Oh, I'm ready. Kids will fly home in a couple days.
Raise.
Yeah, it'll be good.
Is that they don't like, I appreciate it.
One's in New York, architect, and the other one's in DC.
So I asked Abe today to get them to take out, it's just like.
I ran a couple of East Coast kids now, which is, right, I moved here from Boston with them, so I just moved back to the East Coast. Yeah.
You're not the car, you're not the car.
I don't want to. I don't want to. You're getting old. Okay, because I guess.
Keep trying to reassess. There isn't actually.
They knew it was possible.
It's just a normal pixel. It's just that the.
Grace
Isn't as much. Oh, congrats.
A little worried. Wow. Very scary. Wonder my thumbs. Retailers council. You know?
I think
It's gonna be great, and I'm so good. And this is one of those things that is so good for our city. I'm just so proud to have like worked on this. It's so close to the mission. Then you're gonna, but then you're getting a lot of work on your plate. But
Say thank you for coming.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm here. I am online. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Happy holidays. Thanks, Dave.
Before the holidays. Wait, are you guys? I'm with you guys.
Because, yeah.
People don't want it.
Have you?
So I was gonna try and talk to him, how to avoid. So I think it's part of this trip. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Cameras. Which basically. It's just part of things. It's like. They change slightly. So then. These officers are years of these, motorcycles. This lab. That's considered. Super. And he's what they do.
Yeah.
Gotta have a stamp. They all write on where the sticky. Opinion on this list. Over 2 years, they've been cracked down on it, and they pretty much stopped it. And they have cracked down. He's like, well, why didn't he? He's like, well, and then they forgot. Because they can just. And say.